Welcome from the Office for Education Policy. This is our 10th video on the Arkansas Teaching, Learning, and Assessment System, and today we're going to tackle what teachers need to know about the ATLAS interims. So just a reminder that each of these different parts of the system were built for specific purposes, and they were designed to support that purpose. And when you use them as intended, you're going to get the most out of them. So if you're trying to use the interim assessments, you need to understand their design, because they could have been designed a number of different ways. However, they were designed a very particular way to support very specific types of inferences for you along the way towards the summative. So if you're getting into the portal and you're starting to take a look at this, I want you to take a look on this slide at how there are both 3 through high school interims and there are K2 interims. I'm going to give you a little bit of information about both initially, but I'm going to focus on the grades 3 through high school today in this video. Hopefully you already know how to get to the ATLAS portal. It's atlasportal.org, and you know to go to Teachers and Test Administrators and to scroll down to Reporting and then click on the reporting link. I'm going to address things from a district level, a school level, and then a classroom level, and try to tie the different pieces together about how these interims might be useful, and also some limitations that are really important depending on the role that you're in, whether it's district, school, or classroom. Just a reminder that the interim assessments do have a particular design. They are assessing how your students are developing and progressing and mastering grade level standards during the school year. The interims include items from the full blueprint of the test. That means that these interims are going to assess the complete set of expectations that students are supposed to know and be able to do by the end of this school year. So that's really, really important. It's a very different type of interpretation that is supported with interims compared to summatives. So are they progressing and developing in their understanding and their demonstration of mastery of the grade level standards that they're currently learning through the year? And this leads to you needing to adjust your expectations based on when the interim is taken and which standards you expect your students to have learned at the time. Some students who are at grade level may not have had the opportunity to learn some standards, and some students who are below grade level are simply below grade level because they haven't had the opportunity to learn. So timing is everything, and the classroom teacher is in the best spot to understand and interpret this information because of this. And I'll come back to this several times. It's really an important caveat or condition that we need to pay attention to. I want to share some really important information right now that I don't know if this filters down to teachers, but I think it's really important. So I'm going to put this out there. We have a schedule for the interims this year, and there are a couple of different things that you need to know. This is a very unique year, especially for the K2 interims. So the ATLAS interims were only available for science last school year, the 23-24 school year, and they weren't required. And the interims are available this year for grades 3 through high school, but they're also not required. However, it's very advantageous if you're using them because it's going to build a history over time that's going to give you so much more information about your students than you would have on your own from year to year, because it's going to be in the system. The schedule is here, so the next interim will be up February 3rd through the 14th, and everything that I'm talking about now about the first interim will apply in terms of what you should be expecting. So a special note about K2, these are going to be required next year, but because they're going through some changes, we've got some items and scoring issues that are under resolution. Some of the items have functioned better than others, and because this is a test that typically you would take 3 to 4 years to develop, and Arkansas is trying to do this in under 18 months, it's not surprising that there are some things that need to be resolved during this year. So It is not required this year for the students to take the interim. If you have already done the work with other assessments, whether that's for a dyslexia screening or deeper dyslexia diagnosis, or whether you've done this with testlets or other information, you can go ahead and use that and not redo it or redo what may be coming. So it's my understanding that the winter interim was scheduled for January 13th through February 21st. There will be something available, but it will not be a full interim, so that'll require a special video to talk about how do you interpret those scores. In the meantime, you have other things available to you in your high quality instructional materials. You also have testlets that have been available to you. So hopefully you've already done some of the assessing that you need to do to figure out what do your students need in terms of opportunity to learn, and you're working on the learning part and giving time to the learning part. A quick reminder that you log in, and once you log in, you select the interim and go to the dashboard. Similar reporting interface for the interims as for summative. I'm going to dig into the grade 5 math interim just because I've taught grade 5 math. I've taught math at a lot of different grade levels, but it's just kind of fun. I enjoy the concepts at that, and so I relate really well to it. So we're going to dig in. Depending on your permissions, you may see all of this, or you may just see your grade level. But regardless, if you're a district person, you might see all of the options. If you're a school person, you may only see the options that are related to the grade levels or end of course exams that are relevant to your school. And then if you're a classroom person, you probably only see your classroom, so there's not a lot of selection. Let's start with some important caveats. If you're at the district level and you dig in, you're going to be able to see the interim scores for your district. You're going to be able to tell that you have so many kids who have taken this. One of the things that I would encourage you to know about is that the interims are reporting out over time, over this entire window. So this window is now closed. So the early interim that I'm showing you is probably the end result. But if you're looking at your classroom or district or school results during the window, know that the state and the district numbers can change, as well as the school numbers, because it's going to be calculating the average scale score and the percentage of students based on that information as it's coming in. So if you want a final piece of information, you need to pull it from the end of the window. Otherwise, some of these will be moving numbers. And it's important to know that if you're looking to compare school A to school B to your district, to your state, you want to do that at the end of the window. Just because then you're going to get the most reliable information. Everybody who's going to take it should have already gotten into the system. It's just an important piece to know. Otherwise, you're kind of comparing apples to oranges, and those numbers could change over time. The other thing to think about too is at the district level, it's very hard to know what's going on at school A and school B. And so when I look at 2% versus 13% of kids proficient, and I look at the two performance distributions, and I look at the scale scores, you really have to hold your inferences. And the reason I say that is this is not a reflection of student achievement like on the summative. This is not the end of the year. This is during the year. And so the differences between these two schools could very much just be about what standards they've had the opportunity to learn. And so if they've been working in different order, different units, that could explain some of the differences. The real meat that you need to get to is you want to get to what's in these accordion pages, which are the reporting categories. So that's where we'll spend some time talking about that in a later slide, but be careful not to over-infer. I guess that's my biggest lesson for this slide is you really can't compare school A to school B without knowing exactly what they're doing in terms of curriculum, pacing, composition of students. All of those things matter because this is achievement, this is not growth. So you have to be cautious. And I'll show you where the value lies in a later slide. So at the school level, you might be thinking, well, at the school level, there's more information. Well, there is, but the same caveats apply. If you're going to try to interpret these results, you need to be careful. First of all, what is the timing? Am I looking at this at the end of the window and these are now going to be static? If you're looking to compare classrooms to each other or classrooms to the school district or state. If you are looking at performance levels and scaled scores, again, you want to look at that at the end of the window. In addition, you have to keep in mind that different classrooms may have offered different types of opportunity to learn in different standards within those reporting categories. So that could explain differences within and among classrooms. So the interim, the most important thing to remember is you have to ask yourself, have students had an opportunity to learn all of these standards? And it's the middle of the year, the beginning of the year, and the answer to that is probably no, unless they came to you above grade level from last year. And classroom assignment is going to impact your ability to interpret achievement. Remember, students' prior achievement is highly predictive of their current achievement, so you have to be suspending some of your typical inferences about achievement when you're looking at the interims. It's all about what are my students progressing on in the way of the standards that I'm expecting them to have learned. So if I've provided opportunity to learn on some standards, and I see my students are demonstrating that, that's the type of information that I should be looking for. If I have provided opportunity to learn in a set of standards and only a small group of my students were able to demonstrate that, that's important to know. But you don't go and look at these performance levels and go, oh my gosh, my student is at level 1. You think about whether or not the student themselves has had the opportunity to learn. When you look at the aggregate, you think about, as a class, have these classrooms had opportunity to learn? Since it is a full blueprint, there will be items that they haven't learned yet, and they need to know that, and you need to know that, and keep that in mind so that you don't over-infer and course correct in a way that isn't helpful at all. So let's dig into this. What can you get out of the information we get at interim? So classroom level, this is where you will know the most about students' opportunity to learn. As the classroom teacher, or if you're an instructional specialist who's very familiar with what has been provided to students in the way of instruction and opportunity to learn and which standards, in which areas that's been provided. And because this is closest to understanding what's already been taught, what students have had opportunity to learn, this will serve you very well when you go to interpret the results, because you're going to know the most at the classroom level about, oh, I haven't even touched that standard yet, no wonder my students couldn't do that, or, oh, like something happened because only a couple of students were able to do this, and I know we've been through the unit on this, and I need to go back and figure out why. And there's a different tool for that, by the way. You're probably going to hear a few things over and over that are super important. Again, there's limited information. And at the student level, this is incredibly important. It's a shorter test. It's a mini summative blueprint. So there are going to be fewer items, which means that the information we get is always going to be less reliable. Fewer items equals less reliable. If you wanted a completely reliable test of all the standards, you need to have over 300 and some items, and nobody wants to test students in that way anymore. Reporting responsibly means a little less information, but at least some information. So if you look here, I'm in a classroom. I can see overall for my students. Again, I would interpret the performance distributions and the scale scores based on when I'm pulling this report and what I know about my students. Like, what if I have a cluster of kids who came to me way below grade level? Then we're trying to get caught up and get on grade level and teach grade level standards. Pieces of information like that are really important when you interpret this. Let me look at my student here, Jimmy Booker, and notice he's below mastery on computation and algebraic reasoning. He's below mastery on geometry and measurement and data analysis, and he may have come to me below grade level. And so not a lot of information here. And that's okay. I'm going to show you where you're going to get your information in just a minute. It's just important to know that if there's not enough information in a mini summative adaptive test, a student may not take enough items within a particular standard in order to be able to give you back enough information. So you will also see if the student is at or near, above mastery, or there wasn't enough information to tell. And that's a responsible thing. That means the student's kind of all over the map. And that also has its learning implications that you can follow up with. All right, now let's get into some meat that you can get from the interims. And again, sometimes the interims, or any data, leads you to more questions than answers, but I think we're going to get to some areas where we can start to narrow things down. So here we have a standards level report, which also has some important caveats, but this is at the school level. I've got 3 classrooms, and you can see they each have a certain number of kids, and I also have this odd classroom that's a students not roster. There's only 1 kid in there, so I'm not going to worry about it. You can see it's for the standards report. When you expand each of these accordions, you'll see that there's not enough information because you can't really get a standards level report on a student. It's just not reliable, and it would be irresponsible to report that. So what we have here are classroom level standards reporting. And if you've watched earlier videos from the summative assessment, you may have been introduced to this already. But if you look at each of these, it represents a standard. And when you click on the little button, the little information button, you get the standard itself. The one that I've selected first is to use computational fluency to multiply multi-digit whole numbers by using strategies and algorithms, including the standard algorithm, with mastery by the end of 5th grade. So again, if your students haven't mastered it yet, it's not a problem. But you take into consideration how much opportunity they've had to learn, how they might need to have more practice, how some kids need more practice than others, etc. So underneath the standard itself, I have a column that has proficiency question mark, or proficient question mark, and then another column that says weak or strong. And the proficient has these symbols that I've put down here at the bottom. If it's a check mark, it means they're above the proficient standard. If they have this half circle, they're at or near the proficient standard. If they have the big X, which all 3 of these classrooms do, then it's below the proficiency standard. And if it has the asterisk, it's insufficient information to tell. And that's okay, because there's other ways to get that information that are standards aligned. So what I know from this report is that as a whole, my classroom has not mastered this standard. Now, I may not have even taught it yet. That's important to know, right? So if my kids have had opportunity to learn, but they're kind of in the middle and they're still working on consistently demonstrating these skills, then being below the proficient standard is no cause for alarm. That's where the teacher, or if you're an instructional facilitator looking at this, you don't take this and say, oh my gosh, I've got to go back and remediate. You think about whether or not they've had the opportunity to learn, whether or not they have been practicing this. Do I expect them to be solid now, or are there things that will help build these skills that are planned for later in the year? Now, these results are from November, so this may be something that nobody's really taught. But the next column, the weak or strong column, is what I kind of use to figure out where my priorities might be. So if this is a standard that I didn't expect my kids to have had enough opportunity to learn and demonstrate mastery, I'm not going to worry about this. I'm not going to worry about this standard because I'm going to come to it later. And then hopefully by the mid-year or the summative, they've had the opportunity to learn, they've had the opportunity to practice, and they can demonstrate with mastery. So the other part of this, under weak or strong, is if it has a plus sign, it means it's an area of strength. It means that this group of students did really well on this compared to how they did on the other items on the test. So that's an area of strength. If you see an equal sign, like this one in Classroom B and in Classroom C, that means that their performance on this standard is similar to their performance on the test as a whole. So it's about equal. They're performing the way you would expect based on how they're performing on the whole test. When you have a minus sign or a negative sign, that means it's an area of weakness. It means that compared to how your students did on the rest of the test, this is an area that is weaker than the other areas. And then, of course, the asterisk is insufficient information. So if I were in a PLC and we were looking at our interims together, and I were the person in classroom A, I would be thinking about, I wonder why my kids did worse on this than they did on the rest of the test. Is it who I have and what I know about who I have? Because remember, achievement is subject to who is assigned to you. Your class composition does matter. I've had classes that were everything from, I had a class of 6th graders, 32 6th graders, and 22 of them were super gifted. And then I've had classes where half of my class was below grade level in math, and maybe 5 of my kids were ready for algebra in 6th grade, and some of my other kids were advanced but maybe not ready for algebra. So you know your classroom best, and it takes that knowledge of the classroom to really interpret this information well. So what might I do about this? Well, in a PLC, I might ask, who's getting this? Like who is, how are you teaching this? How much opportunity have your kids had to learn this? But then I also might take this standard and put together a classroom assessment, because the minus sign doesn't tell me anything about where my kids were struggling. And the interim is not going to give you the specifics to tell you what to do next. All it's going to do is be a signal about where your kids are at this point in the year. And again, the most important thing is if they haven't had an opportunity to learn, then you're not going to worry about it. But if they have had an opportunity to learn, and these are your results, then Classroom A probably wants to go a little bit deeper and figure out who's struggling and in what ways are they struggling. And you can do that with assessments from the classroom assessment tool. That's part of the Atlas system. You could do it from your high quality instructional materials tools. You have other tools that would allow you to focus on that standard and maybe do 8 to 10 items that look at this different ways. And that might help you uncover where students are struggling. Is it a small group of students? Is it a missing piece? There are just so many different explanations that giving a test that's closer to the learning, like a classroom assessment, or formatively assessing them, having them work on it, and having them reflect on or work together and then listen to their conversations about how they're solving the problem. That's a great way to notice misconceptions or struggles with thinking, and really to figure out what to do about it, you do have to uncover where the misconceptions are, where students are struggling with their thinking. And that's always best done with closer to the learning tools, such as formative assessment processes and small units, or not units, but small classroom assessments that help you uncover their thinking, where students could actually identify where their mistake is. So that's important to know. Over here, under standard 5CAR.4, you can see again we have this interesting difference where we have a minus for Classroom B. So again, you could dig deeper, you could talk to each other in PLCs. Notice over here that we've got some areas of strength. So if these are areas that I've taught and my kids are getting it, then that's a good thing. Maybe they just need to remember every once in a while with a little bit of practice. So this is how the interim assessment results are intended to be used, that you would not necessarily focus on trying to get standards level information for every kid, but to look at patterns based on opportunity to learn, what are my expectations, how are my kids doing based on those expectations, and always keeping in mind that when you give this and what you've done up to that point matter in terms of how you interpret it. Now, I think the range PLDs, these are the performance level descriptors, that's what PLD stands for, that were used for setting standards for the assessment based on alignment with our standards. And what these do is they show you what students are expected to demonstrate to be at a certain level for each standard. These exist across the subject areas, as you can see, and they've got them up here for the screener for K3 as well. We're going to dig into the math, and I'm going to show you how these are intended to be used, especially with the interim or with the classroom tool. If your students are, or any kind of assessment process that you're using, it's really good to know what are the expectations at the grade level in order to be considered proficient or above. And we have great information to tell you that. We've not had this before. So this is a super great tool for PLCs, for any kind of data team, learning team, instructional facilitator, teacher, etc. I'll start by saying that opportunity to learn can look like different things. So your instruction and the things that you ask your students to do as a part of their learning of a particular standard or set of standards, it matters. And the PLDs really help you understand where you need to be going within a standard in order for a student to be able to demonstrate proficiency or mastery of grade level standards by the end of the school year. So in our case, we looked at two standards, 5.car1 and 5.car3, where we had differing results across classrooms. And one way you can figure out how you're different or why those differences may exist is you can look at the performance level descriptors. So when you open the link, you can click on the grade levels. I've got the grade 5 tab open, and you can see that the way to think about these is to think students that are a level 1 may be able to do things like, and so for that first standard, computational fluency, you can see what a level 1 student is able to do. They can multiply a number with greater than 4 digits by a 1-digit number with regrouping using place value strategies or without regrouping. So that's level 1. A level 2 student has to be able to multiply a number with greater than 4 digits by at least a 2-digit number without regrouping. And then level 3 for 5th grade is to multiply a number with greater than 4 digits by a 2-digit number with regrouping using either their place value strategies. And then number 4 is multiplying a number with greater than 3 digits by a number with greater than 3 digits without regrouping. So you can see the level of difficulty increases across the levels, and it gives you some very concrete examples. So say your students at the beginning of the year, you're giving them items that are at a level 2, and they really haven't encountered items that are at a level 3 or a level 4. Or some of your kids are, but not all of your kids. It's really going to depend, again, upon the composition of your class and how they come to you and how you support them for their learning opportunities. But this tells you very explicitly what the expectations are, because the items are going to be aligned to these expectations. And when students get enough of the items aligned to a particular level, then they're going to be demonstrating mastery or higher. Or if they're not, say they're getting a lot of items that are aligned to level 2 because they keep getting level 3 incorrect. This comes back to, what do I need to put in front of my students? What does practice look like? What does the formative assessment process look like? What strategies? How are my kids learning these things? And how am I increasing their skill level to at least a 3 or above? And if they're not at a 3 or above, are there ways that I can scaffold or support their being able to start working with these items? Again, this is whether you've taught it or not, this is kind of the expectation by the end of the year. So it's helpful to have it. If you look at the 5car.3, I'm going to call it for sake of time, this is about decimals, given models of 2 decimal numbers to the same place, add or subtract. And then for level 2, given 2 decimal numbers to the same place, add or subtract. So the implication there is they can do it without a model. And then given 2 decimal numbers that are not the same place, or a decimal and a whole number, they can add and subtract. And so you can see how this is increasing difficulty. So this matches up to what experiences are your students having? If you're never getting them to a level 3 experience, how are they going to demonstrate that unless they already came to you well above a level 3? So that's just important information to know. These are available across all the standards and are incredibly helpful for PLCs. My favorite thing to think about, I've worked with groups that would get together. We called them data teams, not PLCs, but they would look at their results of an interim assessment, and they would then look at the expectations, and they would talk about the types of activities they were doing with their students. And through that shared knowledge and the results, we were able to identify high value learning experiences that returned learning value in terms of what we were seeing in assessment. So these are things that you could be doing within a learning team or with an instructional facilitator. High value activity. Let me give you a real life example of how you might connect what you've got from the interims. You shouldn't spend tons of time looking at the interim results, particularly if you know that you've only covered a certain number of standards. You should focus on what you know your kids have had opportunity to learn, and then dig deeper using either formative assessment practices. Those are usually my favorite because they come with less paperwork. Providing my students with learning activities and then observing them as they do those activities sometimes not only saves me paperwork headache in terms of grading papers, but it also really tunes me into how they're thinking about what they're learning. So that's just a heads up. Now, if you are somebody who really likes to give assessments, I encourage you to always make sure your kids are spending 10 times more time learning than they are being assessed. And then if you are assessing them, that they're a partner in that assessment, and that the results of what they do, they become a shared person in understanding those and making those different. So let's take a look. The names have been changed to protect the innocent, but this is actually a report that went home to one of my friends, and they called me up and said, "What does this mean?" Because this was just sent home. It was a piece of paper in a backpack. And I thought, oh, I got to take a look. Let me figure this out. So this is a classroom assessment that was comprised of 4 questions. Those 4 questions had differing numbers of possible points. But what you can see is on the left, this was a 4-question test. So 4 questions is not very reliable, so you're going to really want to dig deeper and not base any big decisions on 4 items. But what this could do is just kind of help you differentiate what the struggles are, or, you know, do I even need to do this if the student needs to be doing other activities? Because obviously, look at the points earned out of the points possible. They've gotten every single point possible. So some of the items in the classroom assessment are a single item, but they come with multiple points or multiple parts, and kids can get partial credit. And so that's important to know as well. One of the things that I like is understanding what's in there. So you can see these are aligned to the standards. You can go to the PLDs and you could figure out, like, is this assessing the PLD at a level 3, a level 2, a level 1? But here the student took these 4 questions on these 2 standards, develop a model to describe that matter is made of particles too small to be seen, and then a little bit deeper is measure and graph quantities to provide evidence that regardless of the type of change that occurs when heating, cooling, or mixing substances, the total weight of matter is conserved. So I can think of some really fun things to do with that. I love teaching science. But those are the 2 pieces that this student was tested on. And what I was concerned about is this piece of paper came home and there was no explanation for it. If you're going to send assessment results home, you don't assume that parents know what it means. Even highly educated parents may have no idea what the heck this is. That's not to insult anybody else, but we have a tendency to make assumptions about the parents of our students. And we need to not make those assumptions unless we actually have experience with how well our parents understand this sort of information. This could have gone home with, hey, we did some classroom assessments. This is how your student is doing on these expected standards. But just send enough information that the parent isn't wondering about this and what it means. Because Ultimately, assessment is not of any value unless we make meaning from the results in a way that serves the learner and their learning. I'm bringing this slide back from my 4th video. These are great resources for learning how to use the information. These I put forward during the early release of the summative assessments, but the blueprints also exist for these interims. Remember, it's a mini summative, so if you look at the blueprints for the summative, you get a sense of what the foundational pieces are for each of the grades and what students are being assessed on. The range descriptors, that link is also linked prior. That's the performance level descriptors. Just a lot of resources. And if you do end up with questions, you can email or call the help desk. I think that's probably enough for a quick video, trying to keep these under 20 minutes, ideally under 15 minutes. If you want to know more about anything that you saw in this video, you can message us on Facebook or email us at oep@uark.edu. We are very interested in supporting your success and learning and understanding with these new assessments. They are going to be a game changer for Arkansas. And if you have folks that you want us to talk with, let us know. Again, message us on Facebook or email at oep@uark.edu. If you're wondering about how to talk to your parents about their students' interim results, you can check out my other quick video for parents. See you soon.